All right, good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me is via Zoom are Robert Belenke and Michelle Duncan. The assessor today is Jeremy Pohl, and the administrative personnel is Louise Boyley. We will be hearing applications for revision of the business assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act and the City of Winnipeg Charter. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. Statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking in the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application is being brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications being heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on the docket today. Ms. Boyley, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Jeremy Ryan Pohl.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And Ms. Applicant, you can stand. Please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
And do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. The first property on today's agenda is 447 Portage Avenue. So, Mr. Pohl, you can begin.
Okay. File number 224624. The business assessment ID is 24596. We have a total annual rental value, or ARV, $6,011,100. That is for the entire rentable area, the building. The subject property is obviously owner occupied by investors group. The average, or the overall ARV, is $22.35. The breakdown you see below is for $19.85 for a base or net rent, and that with the occupancy costs leads back to the $6,011,100. So on the next page is the board revisions order for the realty. I myself did this with the agent here today. It was confirmed. There was no reduction, and part of that confirmation is the rent that we see today. It is the same rent that we're using today. So on the next page is the cover page for the brief, I guess you would say, indicating myself prepared it. On the next page is the rent portion of it, which is not highlighted for your convenience at 1985, same square foot area. So we're using the exact same rent here today. Page 6 shows that the subject property is obviously an OFA, an upper OFA prime, but they're occupied by investors group. They're at Memorial and Portage. We all know the building, we all drive by it. It does have parking. We'll get to the parking in a moment. The next deal. The next page, starting on page 11, just confirms that it is owner occupied. There's no questions on that. But below that, attached to that, is the same OFA marketplace study that was prepared and spoke to the realty hearing. I invite you to read through the commentary. I won't do that today. It pretty much answers every question I could arise in my mind's eye of the study. It's 2 pages. I'll let the board read it at its leisure. On page 18 indicates the rents in place for the study for the marketplace. And we see that for the 2020 year, the weighted average is $19.94, and the 3-year stabilized from 18 to 20 is $19.21. So they were right at average to just a teeny bit above average if you're looking at it from the stabilized perspective, or they're right at the weighted average for the 2020 year. And from that, as you can see, where the model put it in at 1985, I think that's more than defendable. It's right at where the average is in the marketplace, and I think it should bring here again today. So with that, I'm open to questions.
All right, questions, Marcelo?
Just the basic ones that I asked in the realty hearing. This rent was modeled?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and you had no input into it, correct?
No, not for, if I make a change to the model, I explain that I made a change to the model when it comes out, but no, I didn't have any change to this.
Right. Now, looking at your Class A study, you'll note that most of the leases that you looked at were for spaces that were considerably smaller than the overall size of this building, correct?
Correct. Just so we're clear, and I think we've been over this a lot, I'm sure every panel member knows, this is one of the largest CRUs or individual CRUs in the city. It's one Class A office building occupied by a vested group. You're not really going to find a similar size comparable. They just don't rent out like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Robert, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Michelle, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, just this OFA report, was that done by the city, or was that an external report?
No, I prepared the OFA and the OFB studies myself. There's
Okay.
no pad influence on it. And just so we're clear, if you read the commentary, it gives a good explanation. But generally speaking, I did it because these are 2 prime property type classes and they're heavy investment properties. And I wanted to get a good relationship between what actually goes on in the marketplace and justify it out for myself. So at appeal, it was for the actual model. I'm looking at it to flow through myself. So I review all the OFAs and OFB properties. And if there's anything that I see out of line with the study that I've done, I will make adjustments to it prior to release of the role. And then, of course, because I've done these studies for 6 years, obviously, I can bring them in and use them to defend it, appeal. But generally speaking, this is the most like we've never defended all parameters at appeal minus the cap. Obviously, that would be a separate issue. But as far as the main market parameters, this is the first cycle that at tribunal that we've actually defended every single one. So that was the influence of the study. So.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Navarro, you can proceed with your presentation then.
Okay, and this is taken directly from our realty application. We are requesting an ARV of $5,110,080. On page 4, you can look at the market comparisons that we've used. And again, these are the same comparisons that we used in the realty application. The main reason for the difference in the rental rates from the assessor and ours is that we lowered the base rent based on the size of the overall CRU. So again, Mr. Cole indicated that this is a very large CRU, and we do not think that it would rent for a rent similar to smaller size CRUs that are in his study. So therefore, we've adjusted that rent downward. And you can see on page 5 that we've adjusted the rent to $16.50 per square foot. That is what we are asking for. And on page 6, you can see our ARV calculation. So the rounded ARV is $5,110,080. And that is what we are requesting. And I am open for questions.
All right, Mr. Poole, any questions?
Generally speaking, this is the same presentation that you presented in the
100%.
realty side of it. Okay. All right. And I think we already touched on this. There are no CRUs that are the same size that rent out on an arm's length basis, meaning 200,000 square feet.
No, the CRUs usually do not get this large on a single basis.
Okay. All right. So there is no, and I've looked, so there's no way to do any paired sale rent analysis to determine any kind of influence on size for this size of CRU.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, there
Just the
are
nature of them.
exactly. It's the nature of the beast. There are, and as I indicated also in your study, there are primarily CRUs that are again significantly smaller. So, no, your analysis is also, as I indicated, your analysis is coming from CRUs that are smaller. It's the same reasoning that we used in our realty appeal.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Yeah.
Okay, Michelle, any questions?
So how did you make the decision on the 1650 again versus any other number for rental rate?
Right, it's an adjustment. It's a primarily we were looking at the largest CRUs that we could find to justify the rent that we were looking at. So if you look at our our rental spreadsheet on page 4, you see that there are some CRUs that are over multi-floor. For example, number 8 is getting into that 130,000 square foot range at 1645. So that is effectively how we justified our rent for this CRU. We wouldn't go beyond that really, simply because there is no evidence to suggest that it should be lower than that. But I mean, if you look at the smaller CRUs in there, you can see that the rents are higher. And that's a function of size. As those size decrease and as the units decrease in size, the rents tend to go up.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marcello, was the realty appealed on this?
Yes, it was.
Okay, now secondly, a willing buyer would probably most likely not want to occupy the entire building themselves, would they? I mean, it would be very unlikely to find someone who needs all this space.
Yeah, and they would probably break the building apart and transform it into a multi-tenanted building.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah.
All right. I have no more questions, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now we come to the most interesting one on the agenda today. The parking garage of 447 Portage. And this is appealed as both liability to taxation and value. So, Mr. Poe, you can proceed on item 2, 447 Portage.
Just bear with me. I'm catching up with you. We went a little quicker than I thought, so I'm working digitally. So give me a moment.
Okay. Do
we want to address the class and liability first? Because that would be with
yes, that's true. That would be Mr. Marcello that Navarro has to deal with that. So just enter the introductory information, and then we'll deal with the liability first.
Sure. Okay. File number is 224449. The business assessment ID number is 24606. The total annual rental value is $229,800, and this is for a parkade consisting of 185 stalls. It is owner occupied. From that point, I think we should divert over to class and liability and deal with that.
Okay, Mr. Navarro now on liability to taxation here.
Yes, so in a nutshell, you can look at the first page. FNP Parking Limited is a subsidiary of North Portage Development Corporation. North Portage Development Corporation leases this parking area and uses it for its own purposes. Now, the basis of business assessment is essentially to tax a profited business. And in this case, North Portage Development is not in the business of making profit. Now you can see on page 2 that the levy for business taxes by council is for the purpose of making money for profit. And below that, exemptions are where the organization or association is not operated for profit or for personal gain of its members, is exempt from the imposition of a business tax. That is essentially what we have here. We have an organization that is effectively a not-for-profit organization that leases this space for their own purposes. That is also a reason that we have not put a value on the parking. We've simply assigned a value of 0 to it because we don't think it should actually be taxed for business purposes. Now you can see on page 4 again, exceptions to this, the use of which is not for preponderant purpose of earning a profit. Again, this is not a for-profit operation here in terms of the parking spaces that are being leased. Additional requirements, the articles shall be in the form of the director requires, and in addition shall state the business of the corporation is restricted to fostering the social and economic development of the municipality or other local area in the province. That is exactly what North Portage Development Corporation is intended to do. It's intended to actually develop for the purposes of benefiting the city of Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba, the CN rail yards. On page 5, again, you can see the limitation on distribution of profits. A corporation to which this article applies shall not make any distribution of profits or make distribution of capital assets on liquidation, dissolution, or otherwise, unless the distribution is approved and ordered by the Lieutenant Governor in council. We get into some areas of the corporate structure of North Portage Development Corporation. In terms of that, I don't think we need to go over that in fine detail, but on page 7, and we've highlighted the areas that we think are very specific to our argument here. On page 7, again, we can see additional requirements and articles state that the business of the corporation is restricted to fostering the social and economic development of the municipality or other local area of the province. Again, I just mentioned that. And sorry, here while I get my bearings, I'm using a computer today as opposed to paper. Okay, on page 10, you see a chart at the top that looks at the profit loss of this organization. So we looked at roughly an 11-year period starting in 2010, and you can see that this organization fluctuates between profit and loss. And again, when we come to the very definition of a nonprofit organization, we have to understand clearly that a nonprofit organization is not intended to operate on a loss basis, okay? Nonprofits can achieve profits. It's just that they use those profits for the betterment of whatever they are doing, as opposed to a profit-bearing organization that actually uses those profits to benefit only a small number of shareholders, the company that the organizations are completely different in terms of their purpose. In terms of the Municipal Assessment Act, you can see on page 10, yeah, at the bottom, on section 29, where it says levy of business taxes by councils. Again, for the purpose of making money for profit and business tax exemptions. Again, we've already highlighted this. We do not think that this organization would qualify as a business profit-making business. And again, highlighting again on section 316(3) of the Act, the use of which is not for the predominant purpose of earning a profit. Now, beyond this, we get into the sections that deal with the organization itself in the appendix, what the North Portage Development Corporation is, and the Forks North Portage Partnership. And again, I think, you know, for respecting time here, we are talking about an organization that is clearly non-profited. Its financial statements state that its intended purpose and the purpose of creating this organization was essentially non-profit, again, to better the city of Winnipeg. So we would say to the board that in terms of, you know, granting this, we would ask the board to grant this. We believe that it should not be taxed for business assessment purposes. And I am open for questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Poole?
Yes, is this the first time this argument's being presented for this property, for this subject property, or Forks North parking?
I don't know of any previous cases.
Okay.
But I believe there may be other North Portage Development Corporation properties that are there. It doesn't involve this one. This would be, I think, the first time for this one.
So this is what I'm saying, is the first time the assessment department, in my eyes anyways, hearing this argument, and the first time a panel hearing this.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Let's focus just on the subject property for now. The subject property is owned by Investors Group, correct?
Correct.
And Forks North Parking is completely arm's length, or is it Investors Groups in some way, shape, or form?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's no indication in these documents of that.
It's not what I asked. What I asked is, do you know that is is the parking entity are they acting as a management for Investors Group, or are they an arm's length tenant?
They are arm's length.
So their profit that they get is all to their own. They can do what they want.
Well, as we said, the profit making
Loss expenses
is irrelevant. Any profits would go back into the organization for the betterment of essentially the city of Winnipeg.
I'm trying to, please, let's not worry about that for now. For the actual entity that is which is for the parking, FNP Parking Limited, they are arm's length. So Investors Group is not with them, so they collect a rent, right?
Right.
True rent. What is that rent? Where's the money flowing from one to the other?
I'm not sure of that. You probably have that in your brief.
No, You're bearing this argument here today, but you don't know how the money flows within the building. So Investors Group is allowing an entity in
Well, again,
renting
this
the
only
parkade.
deals with parking, Mr. Cole. It doesn't deal with the building.
Does Investors Group own the parkade?
Investors Group does own the parkade.
So they're allowing an entity inside their parkade to operate, collect profit, and you are unaware of what the actual, as a going concern in their parkade, and you're unaware of the actual rent that they collect off that entity.
No, really for this purpose, it's not really relevant.
Oh, I think it is.
No, if they're not for profit, then it shouldn't be assessed for business taxes.
Now, in that parkade, that is exclusively not open to market, and it is renting back to the employees, correct? Of Investors Group? It's employee parking.
I don't know the basis of that. I don't know that question.
Let me rephrase this a different way. With respect, you are the parking expert for Altus. You are sitting in the owner's shoes today, as far as the business FNP parking. You have a relationship with Investors Group. These are questions you should know.
Okay, Mr. Cole. Even if they are charging their employees something, which I'm not exactly 100% sure of, those profits would still go back into the organization.
But that is my point. As far as an owner of the parkade, which is Investors Group, if you want to maximize your rent collected from your operating tenant, you want to make sure that profits that in place in the parkade are at their maximum that can be. Open the market, collect, because at that point,
I don't know that that's actually what the Act says. I think the Act actually distinguishes between the profit-making businesses and non-profit-making businesses.
Please, you're deviating from the point I'm trying to make, and I'm trying to get to the point with questions. So please answer my questions. This owner of the parkade would want to maximize their profit. They don't care if there is a nonprofit or a whatever they want to do with their money. If it is a going concern in there that they're not arm's length from, they want to make sure the rent that they collect is at their maximum, which would be the rent that we'd be collecting from the marketplace. We don't see this parkade operating as such. It's employee parking for Investors Group. So you're telling me that Investors Group allows FNB parking into the parkade to lease back to their employees, and they're a nonprofit, and the money that they collect doesn't somehow go back to Investors Group. It goes to FNP parking to do what they will.
So my instinct here is telling me that there is a lease between North Portage Development and Investors Group to lease X number of spaces in that parkade. Okay.
To be quite honest, your instinct should have been to examine the lease and present it. Well, we would need to know this.
I don't have that lease. However, again, we're circling back to the point that this is a non-profit organization. It's lease spaces. We have other examples of this, Mr. Cole. 180 King Street is a perfect example of it, where half the parking belongs to essentially a non-profit organization, and we don't tax it.
Moving on from the relationship that I tried to establish between owner of the parkade and the parking entity, I wanted to try to establish whether that is a true entity, separate and distinct from the organization that owns it, property owners. Seems to be not be able to be proven on your point. But moving on to the actual FNP parking, they could be a nonprofit for other aspects of their corporation. But in that specific property, do they generate a profit for, well, like, where is the money going? It's going to fund other things, like, or is it going to back into the parkade?
Why would it go back to the parkade? They've already leased that space. Whatever they make on the parkade goes back into their own organization. So they're paying a lease amount to Investors Group to lease X number of spaces, just like you would with any other lease and any other property, except that that money that they generate for those parking spots doesn't go for making for a profit. I mean, it's essentially going back into the organization.
But you can't tell us where that flow from money, it might be hypothetically coming from that parkade and where it's going within that organization.
Well, that's why we've included some of the financial information on the organization and their profit loss. So
Can I maybe just be blunt about this? Wouldn't it be more prudent and proactive on Altus's part if this was truly the case to get a signed document from the FNP indicating such, and another signed document from the investors group, the ownership of the parkade, indicating such as you're indicating, rather than relying on what you're presenting here today?
well, exactly, a class and liability case.
A statement from investors group saying they are arm's length, they arm's length, they rent out their parkade for employee purposes at a lower than market rent, and they are, and that FNP is separate and distinct from them, and their profits are their own. They're a true arm's length tenant. And then FNP also stating that they are the scenario that you're presenting here today. I don't see either or. I just see what you're indicating. You indicate you haven't even looked at the leases in place to establish that.
Right.
Like in my mind's eye, I can't imagine right now, from what I've seen, that I can establish that FNP is more just simply a management tool for investors group. They're not truly an arm's length tenant. They're effectively a branch of investors group simply contracted out to manage the parkade.
Okay, well, again, there you're stretching it because you have no evidence to suggest that.
You're
So
the
comment
person who is
based
flexing
on-
the liability argument. You need the onus is on you.
You just said that essentially the two are connected. They're not connected. There's no evidence of that. One is a nonprofit organization, one is a for-profit organization, both of which are well known. Second of all, anytime that we have a realty classification liability issue, yes, we can have a lease there, but that's not what we are arguing. We are arguing whether that property should be exempt.
And you don't find that simply two sworn statements from tenant, prospective tenant, and ownership of the park.
It's really
clarify that.
It's based on whether the property actually, the organization fits under that nonprofit status. And we think we have a legitimate case here.
But you haven't proven that they're truly arm's length. You haven't proven that they're effectively a branch of management for investors group. You haven't established that yet. What I'm saying is, as soon as you establish that proof of, you haven't done that yet. I can't tell from an assessor whether they are simply what typically is a branch of effective management. They simply contract out what they would do themselves. So at this point, that hasn't been established in my mind's eye. Two sworn documents or statements from either party would be well on their way. Lease in place showing that would also work. You haven't done any of that. You're just bringing in what FNP corporate structure is from what it indicates, but you're not saying in relationship to the actual use of the parkade. I have nothing to go on here.
Mr. Ball, how many spaces are being leased here?
You have one parkade. You have the entirety of the parkade being leased
So
out.
all 185 stalls.
Yeah. All right, that's all the questions I have. I'll have the rest in summary. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Michelle?
Yes, it's maybe more of a question for the city, but I'll ask it now anyway. I did try to go back to the previous property to find out my own answer, but do you know, has the parking lot portion been included in the realty assessment? The original realty assessment. I see that the property description includes the 185 indoor stalls, but I can't ascertain if that was already part of the actual realty assessment of the building.
Do you want me to answer that, or?
Yeah, if you know that, if someone knows that.
The realty included the parkade in the building. Today, we're only including the business assessment for the parkade because it is FNP parking. What we were, again, through the questioning, trying to establish if FNP parking is merely contracted out management, another branch of the owner, non-arm's length, or whether they are arm's length, and what is the relationship there. So
Yeah, I recognize it's two different scenarios, but I just wondered if the parking was included in the other, or was it separate? So that
yes, it was.
that it was included. Okay. And so then just for clarity, for Marcelo, so I mean, I think it's just, and I'm apologize because I know it's went back and forth a fair bit, but do you know if Investors Group gets profit for their own purposes in any part for the use FNP has of the parking, which is connected to the nonprofit? Does Investors make any money? And I think I heard you say you don't have the lease, so you're not sure, but I just wanted to ask that one more time.
I can't with 100%, answer that because I don't have the lease. I will note that there is no income that is noted in the income and expense questionnaire from the owner of the complex, which is Investors Group. So if they were getting money for parking, they should have actually listed that income on the parking in the income and expense questionnaire.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna say 100% with 100% certainty, but if they were getting money from North Portage Forks Development Corporation, it would likely be noted in that section there, section 113 of the income and expense questionnaire.
And that's in your evidence for this property, right?
Evidence also.
What page, if you don't mind?
It's on page 9 of the assessor's evidence.
Okay, good. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, now I'm not sure I'm understanding this correctly. Is the Investors Group owns the parkade, do they not?
They do own the parkade, correct?
Okay, and then FNP operates the parkade
I believe under a lease.
under a lease. So it would be like any other parking agency may run a parkade owned by somebody else. Is that correct?
Exactly. When a for example, an park, and I'm using this just to demonstrate, there's different types of arrangements that they have with property owners. They often manage the properties for an owner, which means that the owner is getting the profit and paying a fee to the property manager being in park. And then there are some cases where a company like In Park will essentially buy that income stream. They'll lease it. And the owner doesn't see the profits of that lease other than a payment for the lease. And in those cases, they may be responsible for things like property taxes, and that is about it. I believe in this case with FNP, and again, I'm not 100% sure because I haven't looked at the lease, is that they are essentially taking that income.
FNP is getting the income from the parkade.
Yeah.
Okay, now who parks in the parkade? Is it open to the general public? Is it open to Investors Group?
I am not sure about that arrangement.
So if I was an employee, say, of University of Winnipeg, could I lease a parking spot in that parkade?
I can't fully answer that now.
Okay.
I think the point is that the money that goes towards that parking structure is essentially being used for nonprofit purposes.
Okay, but if we look at the Municipal Assessment Act, I mean, sections 29 and 30 don't apply to the city of Winnipeg. So it says where the organization or association is not operated by for profit or for the personal gain of its members, that entire part is doesn't apply to the city of Winnipeg. So the question, so we have to look for meaning solely in the City of Winnipeg Charter. Is that not correct?
Well, we can look at the charter, yes.
And the charter under 316.3 basically says subsection 2 does not apply to premises, the use of which is not for the preponderant purpose of earning a profit. It doesn't mention the owner or the use of the property or who, whether it's a nonprofit or not organization. It's whether the premise earns a profit. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure about that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Now I don't know how much we can take from this, but looking at the financial statements of the North Portage Development Corporation, they show where is it? Pretty significant revenues from parking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And consistently through the years, a pretty significant revenue from parking. So they seem to be making a profit off the parking.
They are, but the nonprofit status does not negate that they can make a profit. That's not nonprofits are not supposed to operate on a loss always. It simply means that the money that they are generating is going towards whatever their purpose is as a nonprofit for the betterment of what they do.
But section 316 sub 3 though applies specifically to the premises, not the corporate entity.
Okay, but this premise is being used for that very purpose of generating revenues for that nonprofit goal.
Okay, so if the premises is making a profit, then it doesn't fall under the exception, does it?
I don't think that's the case, because again, if you're saying that you would be okay if the premise was making a loss or working at a loss, then we wouldn't have an issue. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I would suggest that if it was working on a break-even purpose, I mean, it strikes me that the city charter refers to the premises and not the ownership.
Right. So I think what we were trying to say here is that this premise is essentially leased by FNP. I'm not even sure what their title is again. It is leased by the by FNP Parking Limited. Now, their goal overall as a subsidiary of North Portage Development Corporation is to bring in monies for this subsidiary for North Portage Development Corporation. That's how I understand it. They have different mechanisms for making or generating revenues. However, I don't think that negates their nonprofit status. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. So they're taking the income from this property. Yes, they are generating revenues, but it's not going to investors group. And that's the point that we're trying to make. It's
Yeah,
not,
but I mean, there's a very distinct difference in Section 30 of the Municipal Assessment Act that specifically refers to the organization or association being nonprofit. And Section 316 sub 3 of the charter, which applies only to whether the premises makes a profit.
yeah, I think that if the premise was owned and operated by investors, there would be no question about it, that it would be subject to business tax. But obviously, we are arguing the exact opposite. Because this organization is not in the business of making profit, then it would be subject to those sections of the act which actually exempt it. It's a debate at this point.
All right. I guess I have no more questions then. Summation on the liability. Or Jeremy, have you done your portion on liability yet?
I'll have, I have already done it. We think it should be non-exempt, obviously. I'll do mine in summation, but because of the way the class and liability argument works with the onus being on the agent, they have to summarize first and then I summarize.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Marcello, then. I just wasn't sure, Jeremy, if you had made your presentation that you wanted to do on the liability.
In summary, when this organization operates this parking lot under the banner of North Portage Development Corporation. So FMP is essentially, as I said, a subsidiary of North Portage Development Corporation, which is under its governance structure a nonprofit entity. It's not set up for the business of making profit. Those revenues that are generated through this parking lot go towards the betterment of the city of Winnipeg. And I'm not saying specifically the entity known as the city of Winnipeg, I mean the city of Winnipeg in general, the people who inhabit it. So under that logic, we believe that this property should be exempt from business taxation. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, Jeremy, summation.
Sure. First, I want to establish that it is the onus for class and liability for the agent or the owner to prove out their case. We're going to go through what I see. So on my page 9 and on my page 10 is the income and expense questionnaire from Investors Group. They do not report FNP as a tenant. Full stop. They haven't established from the Investors Group that they have a tenant, a true arm's length tenant in their parkade. They do not report the rent income. In years past, I believe they have. It's been spotty in this parkade. But they do report a stall count and they do report a monthly rent at $231. If you are a true arm's length tenant, you would not necessarily know the ongoings of someone else's enterprise. They're simply a tenanted space in your building. You wouldn't know that rent rate. So from that point, it sure does indicate that they are not an arm's length tenant and that they are a branch management contracted out more in a parking arrangement where the parkade operator typically takes a percentage of the parkade profits. Having said that, that is the typical scenario. But in order to establish the most profits within your parkade, you'd open it up to market. And we don't see that parkade open up to market. This parkade is employee only. It is Investors Group only. So from that aspect, common sense would apply that this doesn't appear to be true arm's length tenant, because if you are a true arm's length tenant, you can control whoever parks in that parkade. And if you truly were trying to get as much money as you can, because you're now operating a going concern in that parkade, you'd open it up to market, you'd allow anyone in there at maximum price to collect the maximum profit you can. That is not the scenario in this parkade. It's not how it's operated. So from that, I look to establish, are they an arm's length tenant? Does Investors Group collect any money from the parking entity? We haven't established that. We heard that the agent did not examine the leases. He doesn't know. You should be knowing that. That's a critical point. We haven't heard that today. We don't also have any sworn documentation from either FNP indicating as such their relationship within this parkade, and as you indicated here today, an appeal from the agent. And you also don't see any from the Investors Group saying the same thing, establishing what the relationship is, whether they truly arm's length or not. Altus represents both these parties. It wouldn't be hard to get that, and it's not here today. So from that point, it falls flat. There's nothing that this panel could entertain because that link hasn't been established, or that separation hasn't been established. I think I can leave it there. But what and I'm gonna maybe stand on my soapbox a little bit here. We have a whole process for this outside of the appeals process. You can appeal it. You can challenge cost and liability at a tribunal, no problem. But if this was truly the case, and if you really wanted to establish this, you can simply call the assessment department up. Hey, this is the case, and apply for an exemption. It doesn't have to be done at appeal. And if you don't get your exemption status, then you could appeal it at that point. To me, trying to shoehorn this through here in an appeal process without the appropriate information that we would need to establish the circumstances to give an exemption if it's warranted isn't the appropriate way to do it. So with that, I think it should be left as such, and I'll leave it at the board's hands. Thank you.
All right. Now on amount, Mr. Poole, you can proceed on the amount.
Almost forgot we're doing quantum too. Quantum is 229,800, 185 stalls. We have the standard city model for underground parkade or heated parking at 103.50. As we can see on page 2 of the brief, this was confirmed as part of the realty, which obviously included the parkade, and it was confirmed by the board. The cycle. If you turn to my page, again on page 9, 185 stalls. They indicate $231 a month rent. They do not have any rent income on this particular IME, but they have done some in the past. Again, it's spotty. Sometimes they report, sometimes they don't. This may be COVID influence too. There might not have been a lot of people in the building. So they're not going to report that. They indicate that on page 10, they write in owner occupied building. They don't say office section owner occupied tenanted other section. I hope that establishes that there is no arm's length tenant here, that their ownership group is reporting from Investors Group standpoint anyways. That includes the parkade. On page 13, comparable, these are the same standard comps that Ms. Warren prepares and my Boardroom as well, but as you can see, 9 is the 447 Portage heated, and they indicate that they're between $231 to $297 a stall. And from that, I think we've established that reasonably $103.05 a stall is more than attainable here. And with that, I'll leave it at the board. I'm open to questions, but I'll leave it at the board to make that decision.
Okay, questions, Marcello?
I have no question on quantum.
All right. Michelle, any questions on quantum?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and Robert, any questions on quantum? I think you may be muted, Robert.
There we go. I'm sorry. Yes, no questions. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And I have no questions on quantum. And Marcello, I take it you're declining to make an alternative argument on quantum?
No, I didn't disagree with the quantum to begin with. So
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Now 10 o'clock. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and do the last property, last few properties. So we'll come back at 10 after 10. All right. Welcome back. We'll proceed on to 355 Portage. Mr. Pohl, you can proceed.
File number is 4328. The business assessment ID number is 24466. The annual rental value is $2,426,040. That is for the entire premise, building premise of 355 Portage, the Air Canada building. The overall ARV is $16.97. The base ARV rent or net rent is $14.47. Just so we know, I went through this building via case management with Mr. Doug Becker, and the building owner, or I should say the building representative from Montreal flew in, and then the property superintendent, I guess you would say, property manager walked through it all with us. So we went through this building in full, and we made some allowances for this building, and they'll continue forward. There's some functional obsolescence within this building. There's also some good space in this building too. Generally speaking, this building, it was built in a day where you needed a large space for what they do. Obviously, they're Air Canada, they keep planes in the sky, so to speak, and they had their workforce within the building. As the time went on and technologies improved, their space that they required was significantly less and less within the building. So their data service room was everything that the building is, and it's more of a data service center, large portion of it anyways, simply needed less and less and less. So at that point, they attempted to refill some of their space with the market, and some of their space was a little dated. Some of the space had some issues. Another space, quite frankly, I don't think would lease out, basically because there's some functional obsolescence in the building. But having said that, we made allowances for that. So I went through this building realty side, and I'll just go through it quickly. It was confirmed on pages 2 and 3 of the brief. So this particular property, we've downgraded. I've looked at it based on inspection and based on the use of the building and how it would be leased out for. And we've made some allowances throughout this building. So those were confirmed, and I don't think they'll be objected to today. It looks like it's been asked for confirmation, but I'll go through my end of it just to prove out to the panel. On page 2 is the 142,960 square foot area at $14.47, highlighted in blue, or yellow, I apologize. And that was based on downgrading this Class A building, and it is a Class A building. It's built phenomenally. No questions about that. But realistically speaking, I believe the marketplace would be less of an A and more of a B for the space that we're speaking of today. If you look at the pictures as we go through, starting on page 6, shows where it's located. We've all seen it. Downtown, and what I was speaking to, they were trying to mitigate the space in the building that they're no longer needing with tenanted spaces, and they do have tenants, but this is one of the listings that they had from 2017. They were asking $16 net. As you go through, you see they've got quite a lot of space that they are offering, and in 2019, they're asking for $15 net. So they're actually asking a bit less, and I think they're trying to find out where they're going to reside within the marketplace. Some of the spaces in here are quite nice. Others are dated and rocking on wood flooring. you know, there are some problematic spaces, but for the space that we're looking at today, we put a average rent where I think this would fall into is be a B, bit of an upper B, depending on which CRU you're in the building. The I&Es started on page 25 to 26, and the COVID report is on page 27 and 28, if you care to read that. And what I looked at for was the Class B study, or I provided the Class A study, which what A would be. But realistically, the B is where I would indicate that this would be to average, no less than average, but maybe a bit more depending on the finish of the CRUs that may be in place. So when we put $14.47 in place, we see in 2020, starting on page 35 of the OFB study, or page 4 of the OFB study, page 35 of the brief, we have a $14.84 in 2020 weighted average, and overall stabilized out over 3 years, $14.39. So I think that fits perfectly in. And again, I adjusted this building, and the characteristics of this building before it went out onto the roll to accommodate that. So, I mean, it allows for it. It's at $14.47, and I think it's appropriate. With asking of confirmation, I'll leave it up to the development to present that. So, with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions, Marcello?
I have no questions.
Okay, Robert,
No questions, thank you.
Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, your presentation, Michelle, I noticed that you're asking for confirmation.
Yeah, we are simply asking for confirmation.
All right. I gather there's no questions on that then from anyone?
No questions, thanks.
No questions.
Let's go to 300 Carlton then. Let me just open the files.
You just went black here. Oh, there we go. We're back.
Ah, okay. Mr. Pohl on 300 Carlton.
File number is 224565. The address, obviously 300 Carlton, and the business assessment ID number is 41050. And it's Post-Media Business Services Division of, it looks like it's owner occupied, obviously. We have a $12.07, the total annual rental value, or ARV, is $527,280, and that is for the total building of 36,189 square feet, and the ARV associated with that is $14.57. The base rent that we have for this property, or net rent, is $12.07, and then of course the occupancy cost next to it. So we've rated this as a lower end B. If we go through the building or the property, look on page 2, shows the aerial photograph of the property. It's behind Portage Place Mall. It's to the left of Air Canada Center, and it's on Carlton there. So you look at the I&E, this is what we have. This is what they submitted. Obviously, they're owner occupied, and they're just submitting a book rent.
Oh, you just went black here. Hang on a second. Okay, you're back.
Did you hear everything, or did I cut out?
I don't think we missed anything.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll keep going. So, all right. So then the COVID questionnaires are reported next. Minor impact. So what we looked at was, what I looked at was the OFB marketplace, and again, feel free to read through the commentary. We see that for a $12 rent, they are outside of the norm, or the mean, which is at $14.39 stabilized, or for the 2020 or $14.84. They are outside of the first standard deviation and into the second standard deviation. So they're quite discounted. They're middle point. So you're looking at a very low percentage of rent. Basically, between $11 and $12, there was 2 tenancies within the 217 series that leased out this seat for the B-class building. So with that, I think the lower rent put in place is appropriate for the building. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, any questions, Michelle?
I have no questions.
Okay, Michelle, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Robert?
No questions, thank you.
All right, so Marcello, your presentation.
Well, we're asking for a confirmation. I believe that's what the presentation actually asks for.
Yep. Okay. Any questions from the panel on that then?
No questions.
Okay, so let's go on to the next property, which would be 365 Hargrave. Let me pull up the file. Okay, on 365 Hargrave, Mr. Poole.
Okay. Bear with me here. All right. So file number is 224389. The business ID is 53884. It is for in-park. It is the parking component of this building at 365 Hargrave. We have heated and unheated parking here. These are both model rates. I made no adjustments to them. We have 28 stalls that are heated at 103.50, and we have parking unheated at 10 stalls at $68 a stall. So that gives us our 42,960 ARV. On the next page is page 2, the photos of the property. Again, off of Ellis and Hargrave. We see on page 3 that there was an order for this for the realty. There was a reduction warranted by the panel, or by the board, I should say. When you look through to the rationale applied on page 4, the decision is based on the net operating income presented by the Assessment and Taxation Department with a capitalization rate of 7.25. This includes parking valuation of $678,000 agreed to by both parties. So what we have here is the net operating income, which is obviously inclusive of the rent that we were talking about today for the parkade, the parking portions, I should say, the parkade and the outside parking. So there's no disagreement in that by both parties. So below that, again, is on page 5, the comparables that were used for and the workup that was used in hearing, as well as on page 7, which is the outside or non-heated portion for the 10 stalls on page 7. So with that, we can see on page 8 that the parking highlighted in blue is what they're indicating. But given that both parties agreed, agent and assessor agreed, and the board confirmed it, and I reviewed it, I think it's appropriate to apply it again here today. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions, Marcello?
I have no questions.
Okay, Michelle, questions?
Really just a numbers one. The city has 38 stalls, 28 heated, 10 unheated. The applicant has 28 indoor and 9 outdoor instead of 10. Do we know if it's 38 or 37 stalls?
I wasn't on site. They could be using one stall and reporting it as such as far as cargo related, operations related, and it's not renting out. That typically happens within the marketplace. I couldn't say one or the other. And at that, realistically, you're only having one stall one way or the other. Really is a non-influence. If there were, say, 15 stall differential, now on this size parkade, now we're have to find a discussion on that. So, but,
thank you. No other questions. Thank you.
Okay, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
I guess I got maybe more just general interest. When you have heated parking, presumably there's electrical and heat and that sort of thing, but you don't charge the for that specifically, is that because it's usually included in the monthly net rent? The
Yeah, well,
calculation of it?
like when I work through it, I look at what the gross revenue is, obviously, and then you look at what the expenses are, and those would typically come out in your expense ratio. So when we put the marketplace in, obviously you don't have electrical inside a heated parking, but on the surface parking or exterior parking, you sometimes do. But that would typically play out in the percentage that we use for expense ratio. So there is no if you're looking for an occupancy cost stated to it, we don't factor it in that way. We look at a net rent from the starting point.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought you'd say, but just out of interest. Okay, Marcello, again, you're going to be requesting confirmation here.
We are requesting confirmation, correct?
Okay, any questions from the panel?
No questions, thank you.
No questions, thank you.
All right, let's go on then to item 6, 200 Graham Avenue. Let me just pull up the files again. Okay. 200 Graham Avenue, Mr. Poe.
All right. From file number 22 or file numbers 22, 41, 78, 41, 78. It is 200 Graham. The business ID or the property itself is 200 Graham. The business ID number is 30-25-1. The annual rental value is 321,840. This is for a total area of 15,724 square feet. And the ARV attached to that would be $20.47. The base ARV rent or the net rent would be $17.97. And again, applied to the occupancy cost to the right would bring you back to your $321,840. Just so we're clear, on page 2 is the border revision order. I prepared the realty brief for this, and I mean we'll be on it as we go forward. But I was sick on this day, and Mr. Cooper took it in for myself. So he kind of read from the sheet for me, and I think that he did a good job at it. It was confirmed, highlighted in yellow. So the realty portion was confirmed. It was based on evidence that we presented. So when we go to page 4 is the realty brief that I would have presented, but Mr. Cooper presented for myself. As we can see on the next page, page 5, highlighted in yellow, is the bid that premise that we're speaking of, and it's 15,724 square feet for $17.97 for potential 282,560. So from that place, we'll go straight to the OFA marketplace. Again, please feel free to read through the commentary. It is pretty important. Gives a good general synopsis of the studies, and it's a sistering of the A and B studies. It pretty much raises any questions in my mind that could be asked and answers them. So I won't read through the commentary. I'll trust that you'll read through it. On page 9 is the global marketplace. The weighted global marketplace is $19.94. The stabilized for the 3 years is $19.21. So today we have one just hovering at around $18, which would put it on the lower end of the OFA range. And that's appropriate. There is a range within the OFAs, and this one here is I don't want to use the term lower performing OFA because it is a Class A building. There's a reason why they're Class A. And when you're a Class A, you're definitely that. But so below that, I'll trust you read through the Johnson report information. I have a synopsis here between Cushman Wakefield and the Johnson report. We have the Johnson report full, which we'll go through in a moment. When we look at 200 Graham, which is on page 5 of the study or page 10 of the brief, we see that the 3-year average is $16.91 and the stabilized is $17.55. And we see that for the stabilized, those 15 CRUs at least out of that. So when we look at the overall asking rate as well for this property, if you look on page 11 or 6 of the study, you see from Tuna Graham, it's the very first one, starting back from 2015, they are asking $17 a square foot, and it goes up to $18 the next year. So from 2016 onwards, they're asking $18 for every year in the building. So we have a pretty good established rate what they're asking and what they're achieving. So with that, I think an $18 rent is achievable, and it's within market. It's at lower end of range. With that, I'm open to questions if there are any.
Okay, Marcello.
I have no questions.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, well, I have a question on the rentable area, but that will come up. I guess with Marcello, there seems to be a difference there. All right, Marcello, on your presentation then.
Okay, we are looking at 200 Graham. And I'm just going to check what the difference was in leasable area. Okay, so there is a slight difference in leasable area, and that was likely a result of the fit up for the new property, the new tenancy. But I'll skip everything and just go to page 5 of my presentation. That is where the argument lies. So this was taken from the 2021 INE. And we can see that there was a new lease signed on March 3rd, 2021. So that's roughly 1 month before the reference date of April 1, 2021. And it is to the Canada Life Assurance Company for 14,514 square feet. That is the unit that we are talking about. And the monthly rent is $20,561.50. Again, for 14,514 square feet, that works out to $17 per square foot. And this is a new lease. That's not a renewal. The previous tenant was BDO Financial. And you can see on page 6, our workup based on 14,514 square feet. We have a rounded ARV of 283,020 versus the ARV of 321,840. And I'm open for questions.
Any questions, Jeremy?
Yes, I do. Just so we're clear to the panel, as I indicated in my study, I didn't look at anything past that wasn't brought to us on the 2020 INE. Anything past 2021 would be post-reference in my eyes because I don't get access to that to do the study until afterwards. So in this case here, we have, as you're indicating, a new tenant in a building that would have been on the 2021 INE, which obviously I haven't looked at yet, and I don't for this cycle. But having said that, you're indicating that this is Canada Life as a tenant, correct? Sorry. Canada, right? You hear me?
Yeah, I said correct.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. And the building owner is one and the same. So there, it is a book rent.
The appellant is Canada Life Assurance Company.
And the ownership of the building is Canada Life as well.
For 200 Graham.
Yeah.
Okay, just wait 1 second while I verify.
He's not. Is 200 Graham Limited not Canada Life?
Yeah, I just, I will take your word for it.
If it's not, please let me know, please.
Yeah, no. It might have just been an oversight on my part. Great West Life Realty, yeah, that would be Canada Life. So then we're simply asking for confirmation. Yeah, that would be correct.
but mainly getting back to the area, we would have had an inspector go through, we would have had the pin put in place. This would all been new data. You're indicating that there's an error in the leasable area.
There's a slight variation, yes. As for it being post-reference, I don't know if that really is post-reference. I mean, the lease itself is from March 2021.
All I'm saying is for my model direct, I get that information after we release the pool. I can't look at that. It's my eyes, it's out of line. You can read through the commentary. I'm not going to get into that. But I just want to make clear that there is a different area from what was put on the roll. We obviously had an inspector go out, look at it, put it on the roll. They would have talked to the entity. It would give us that information, put it in. So if there is any difference in areas which you're indicating, I will go back and I will discuss with management and try to make sure that it is corrected if it is an error kind of thing. It just, from my perspective at this point, it's relatively new. It's not like it's been done for several years.
Yeah.
Or some change in area and they didn't let us know or whatever may happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Fair enough. All the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Michelle?
Nope, no questions, thank you.
Okay, now did I understand you right, Michelle, when you're saying you're now requesting confirmation?
Well, I mean, if there is a change that is going to be made on the square footage, I would assume that the assessor would probably issue a supplementary to correct that.
Okay,
For myself, I can't make that call. I'm not the supervisor, but if there is it'd have to be a significant change, meaning like it's not a 50 square foot difference. It does appear to be 700 and some odd square feet. So that would make a difference. But I would have to go back and verify with the inspector and why it was put in on that. It's relatively new lease. It should have been just put in place. Did you hear it from them? Did they say it wrong? Whatever. And at that point, it's at my supervisor's call. So I think confirmation would be fine from an agent owner's perspective, because you could still appeal that forward if there would be no change. But I will definitely be bringing this up to my supervisor to say, hey, what happened? Typically, you'd see this, and like I was getting, like say it was an old, it's been there forever, and they changed an area. They didn't let us know. Could be right, and we would never know that. So, in this case here, because it's so recent, we would think that would not have happened. But all I can do is try and verify it and move forward.
So we are fine with just confirming it.
okay. All right, thank you. Then we'll go on to 200 Main Street. So on 200 Main Street, Mr. Pohl.
Okay, bear with me here. Catching up. Okay, 200 Main Street. File number is 224185. Business assessment ID number is 32729. It is for the parking portion of the building. It is 325 stalls at our model rent for heated parking at $103.50, which gives us an annual rent of $403,680. So on page 2 shows that the parking was confirmed, I should say the building itself was confirmed, property appeal for realty was confirmed, which included parking, obviously. And that's based on information that we presented. I was part of this appeal. Page 4 is the cover of the brief. Photos of the subject property follow after that. And again, the parking was 325 stalls at $103.50, which gives us our $403,650, which was confirmed. You will not see this as any listings for this property, as this is employee parking for the building. I've had numerous conversations with Altus, other agents with Altus, and at case management level for the municipal board. What it indicates here, if we go further, the monthly rate on page 10 for the INE is $113.58 for 320 stalls. And then you look at the parking that was associated with it, When it indicates here, it looks like this is a discounted rate for market. So it's not at market. And having said that, we don't put any weight to it. I've actually called the contact person on the INE years ago to kind of confirm this. And what was indicated that was some of it is for the tenant, some of it there is a tenant in here, but it was not open to market. So we put it in a market. We don't put any weight to the rents that are placed in this market now. So with that, I'm open to questions.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I think so. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
I went quiet, but I can hear you.
Yeah, if anybody didn't catch it, I said I had no questions.
I can't hear Neil though.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was
That was
felt a cough coming on, so I muted myself. Michelle, any questions now?
No questions, thank you.
Robert?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Marcello, then your presentation, please.
Okay, so we're looking at it's known as PT 200 Main Street. This is the Wawanesa Mutual Insurance Company. And you see a picture of it on page 2. This is the parkade underneath. On page 5, you see our set of comparables ranging from 135.89 all the way down to $52.03. The average is 91.80. That is what we've gone with, 91.80 per stall for 325 stalls for $358,020. And on page 5, you can see our ARV calculation at 358,020. I am open for questions.
Okay, questions, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Your tenant appellant is Canada Life Assurance Company.
My who?
The appellant is the Canada Life Insurance Company.
It's Wawanesa Mutual Insurance Company.
Okay, just you see on your brief, you highlighted Canada Life Insurance Company.
Where?
Page 2.
Oh, okay. So the front page actually says the correct Wawanesa Mutual Insurance Company.
I just wanted to make sure we're talking the same entity. Okay, so that makes sense, because otherwise my next question would be, are they operating parkade? Okay, so it is operated by, the parkade is operated by the ownership.
Correct.
Okay. And you can confirm that a portion of the building is, I never really got a straight answer because it is a large parkade, but it is not open to the public. It's reserved for the ownership.
I did a search online for parking at that location. I couldn't find anything. So most typical market parking, you can do a parking search on it, and you will find the rates, the monthly rates, the hourly rates, all of those. But I could not find for this parkade.
Yeah, but generally speaking, that you represent the ownership of the building and the obviously the ownership and the parking operator is one and the same. That they should have confirmed with you when they took them on as a client that they are not market, they're not open to market, and the price that they charge is their interpretation of market, or is it discounted for the employee?
I mean, I think you said I deal with a lot of parking to begin with, so I looked at the rate and clued in right away that it's not at market. So I ignored it together.
Okay. Just other questions would be, is the market rents that you're presenting today different than that was presented in the realty appeal? Is
the market rents? Of course, yeah, I've looked at parking actually a little bit more with, I don't know if the person, whoever it was from our side who did the realty appeal, ignored the parking. They may have, In this case, I actually looked at the parking very carefully and I said that, no, I don't think that rate is, I think that rate is too high, so I adjusted it based on my own evaluation and, yeah, that's about it.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
All right, I have no questions, so thank you for that. We'll go on to our last property, 268 Fort. Let me open the files. Okay, Jeremy, 268 Fort Street.
Bear with me. You're about 30 seconds ahead of me. Okay. File number is 224553. The address is 268 Fort. The business assessment ID is 2200, and it's for Domo Gasoline Corporation. We had this under appeal, but I'll get to that in a moment for the realty. The ARV is 118,080. The total premise is 6916, and the overall ARV is $17.07. The base rent that we have applied is $14.57, or net rent in lieu. I don't know where it is that. Documents costs are to the right of that, and that gets us back to the 118.80. So below is the subject lease information. It is rented out. We do have a term in place, but realistically, this tenant has been there for as long as I could possibly remember. It's $11.36. On page 2 is a photo of the subject property where it is. I don't believe we got this order yet. I haven't been made aware at the time of the issue of the brief. So I was waiting for the Board of Revision decision on what it was. I didn't get a chance to look at that at the drafting of this business assessment appeal. So file number is 20, or the realty portion is 22, or the file that would be associated with that order, it's the board can access it, is 221925, and as we'll go through that now. We looked at it from an OFS perspective, and of course that's $16 weighted average for the 89 comparables. Again, most of those are outside of the downtown area. This building can be looked at that. The OFS is supplemented by an OFC look, which there are many downtown. So from page 6 and onwards, you look at a rent at about $13.08 weighted average for this for the OFCs. So when we're at $14.57, we're right around there. We're a little bit on the $1.50 more than the average. If you look at page 9, are the photos of the property. Again, for 270 Portage is the building we're speaking of. It does look like a good OF. We classify it as an OFS, could be OFC depending on the market. They're not really going to look at whether it's an S or a C. They're going to just rent it out as what it is. So, but given that, Domo's been here, like I said, as far as I can remember, the sign's been on the side of the building. So they've been there far back as I know. One of the questions I had an appeal for the realty side of it, when you're looking at the rent, around between $11 and $12. Okay, we see them. It's a bit under what the market's at. We see that there is a professional fee of $87,693. That is significant. I don't know what's associated with that. When you see the rents that are in place, it essentially is greater than the rent. That's not a typical. That's not in line. I don't know if that's an error. It doesn't appear to be an error because as we go forward, sorry, I didn't include it in the brief, but I'll speak on record. That was not reported once. It was reported many times last 3 years that I looked at, there was an elevated professional fee. Not sure why. And I have I can't really speak to it. So from that, that is all the information we have to present. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions, Marcello?
Yes, Mr. Cole, were you not aware of the order that came out on February 27th?
No, I didn't get it. I drafted this prior to that. So no, I was not aware of the order.
Okay, thank you.
As indicated, that's why I highlighted, right?
That's my only question. Thank you.
Okay, Michelle, questions?
No questions of the city.
Okay, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
All right, Michelle, you can begin your presentation.
Hey, so this is 268, 274th Street. I believe it's known as 268. I called it 270. It's essentially the same property. And this is Domo Gas as well. You can see on page 5. So there is a lease by the owner, Royal Canadian Properties Limited, to Domo Gas Corporation for an annual rent of $11.36 per square foot. However, there is common ownership in the landlord and tenant companies, and we submit that this is a particular case. The contract rent is above market indicators for comparable lower quality office space and older buildings. So we haven't used the actual rent in this case. We've used comparables. We've come to a rent of $11 per square foot. And an ARV rounded to $93,360. I haven't attached any board orders on any of these files today, but I can speak verbally that the board order actually accepted our net operating income and adjusted the cap rate to 6.25. So it wasn't the assessor's net operating income that they went with, it was ours. So by that, we take it that they accepted our rent and the logic behind our comparables as well. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Poole, questions?
No, other than I just confirmed, I can confirm what the appellant said is the order. I just looked it up right now. And it was released. I'm not sure when it was released, but it was before the drafting of my brief. And I just want to confirm, because maybe I didn't hear this correctly in the realty side of it, because we both did it, obviously. There is common ownership between Domo and the property owner, tenant and property owner.
That is our understanding, yes.
Okay, all right. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Michelle?
So just to clarify, then you do have, for Jeremy, you do have the order open and it's consistent, obviously, with what Marcelo said as far as the BOR decision in February?
Yes, it is. It just I did these briefs a little bit earlier than I usually would because I had other tasks. And at the drafting of this brief, that order was revealed. All right.
Okay, yeah, we're back.
That's okay. Where did I cut off? I don't know.
You didn't cut off audio anyhow.
So
It
you
does
heard all
on
that
our
then?
side. Like it did on our side, but like if you want to just go back like 5 seconds, that'd be great.
Okay, just to confirm what you're asking, it is as the appellant said. I drafted this brief a few weeks earlier as I had tasks for other duties in my workplace. So when I was drafting this brief, that order wasn't available to me, but I did just confirm what Marcello said, and it is true. So their net operating they chose with a capitalization rate of 6.25. I think the only question I had in my mind's eye was whether non-arm's length or what we reviewed was not presented at the realty side. So given that the appellant's going with market and not the contract, their opinion is valid.
Thank you. No other questions from me.
Okay, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions, so now we have heard all the items scheduled today, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your capable presentations, and you've given us a bit to think of on, particularly on the one property there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.